Good morning and welcome to Sandler's 30-minute live webinar series. My name is Rich Austin. I'm going to be your host today as we examine the concept of eliminating free consulting and unpaid consulting so that you can take control of your sale and professional selling. First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for investing your time with us today. We've only got 30 minutes, so we're going to move and we're going to think very, very quickly. Also, a couple of housekeeping items. I'm going to challenge you in the next 30 minutes to be 100% present. And so what do I mean by that? With technology these days in 2019, we've got the ability to understand not only who's on the webinar, but are they distracted? Do they have other open browsers? Are they taking phone calls, things like that, inactivity? So we understand what that looks like. And if you've dedicated 30 minutes this morning to your own professional development, which I want to acknowledge each and every one of you for, I'm going to ask you to be present. I'm also I'm going to ask you to interact with us and answer some questions. And so I want this to be as much of a dialogue as it can be, even though I'm going to be the only one speaking. If you take a look at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a chat box, and you're also going to see some additional materials for support. So I'll ask you to engage with us. Any questions that you might have right now that are specific to your world, that you're interested in, that you want to know about as we go through today's 30-minute webinar, I'm going to encourage you to submit those immediately. I've got Lindsay, you can't see her, she's off screen. She'll relay those questions to me, and so that way we can create a bit of a dialogue. So let's take a little bit of time and examine the concept of free consulting. And free consulting is defined as this: an expert goes into a sales opportunity and they start giving away their intellectual property for free, whether that's knowledge, whether that's expertise, whether that's a proposal, doesn't matter what it is, but we're giving it away and we're not getting anything of equal or greater value in return from our prospects. So here's what we know. In professional selling, whether you're an architect, you're a custom builder, you're an attorney, you're an engineer, you're a therapist, you're a consultant, you're a financial planner, or you're an accountant, and many others, maybe you're in recruiting, it's easy to fall into the trap, the ever-present trap of free consulting. So we're going to share with you some strategies and tactics so that you can take away and apply immediately in your world. How do I get out of that trap? And how do I put a process in play that puts me in control and says, my prospect and myself, we're equals. And so we're going to create a system that provides equal business stature as we move on this morning. So some of you are intimately familiar with Sandler. You know who we are, you know what we do. Others on this webinar this morning, you have no idea who we are. So I'll take a minute, I'll share with you in 30, 45 seconds who we are and what we do, why that might be important to you. So Sandler, you can see the 4 areas that we touch in our world. We're a professional development firm, and our focus is behavioral change. And so then our specialty lies really in sales training, sales process refinement, and building a communication model steeped in psychology that puts us in control so that we can win more often. The second side of our business is in leadership consulting. Same thing, a leadership model for communication steeped in psychology that puts us in control so we can motivate our people the right way. So here's what I'll tell you: whether you're an owner, you're a CEO, you're a president, or you're a producer, what we're going to talk about today is going to impact you if you're in that sales world. A couple of other things that I want to keep you aware of as we go throughout the webinar today. You're going to see a couple of these little text bubbles pop up. If you want to be on board with our sales tip, we send out a sales tip every week. Just text 35893, text sales tip to 35893, and you're going to receive our sales tip of the week. In Sandler, how do we know growth is happening? Sandler Online, we've got a learning management tool, 4,500 hours full of learning, number 1. Number 2, application challenge, something I'm going to challenge you to do today. Based upon the content that we bring, what can you immediately apply in your world starting today? Maybe even this morning, maybe even this afternoon, this 30 minutes of content, what can you take and apply immediately that's going to put you in better control of your sales world? And the last piece is coaching. It doesn't have to be us, but who do you know, like, and trust in your world that can take you to the next level, ask you the types of questions that you need to be asked so that you can accomplish your goals in 2019. So what are we going to cover? What's the actual content that we're going to dive into? Really 4 key concepts here today. Number 1 is asking questions. So here's what we know. In consulting, we're really good at asking questions, but oftentimes we dive into the answers way too soon when our prospects ask questions. So we're going to take you through a journey to understand what is the real motivation to buy for my prospect, instead of just showering them with product info, because we're all experts on this call. I know that, but the key is to have the discipline to save that expertise for an appropriate moment. Number two, follow a clear professional selling system that levels the playing field. So we're going to talk about the concept of equal business stature. Never ever would I want any of my clients or any of you on this webinar to be fulfilling a subservient role when you're in a sales opportunity. And so we're going to talk about how we can fall into that. We're also going to talk about how we can level ourselves up so that we become an equal business stature peer-to-peer player. Number three, set the right expectations and remove assumptions that blur the sales process. How many times have we gone into a sales opportunity and the prospect doesn't know what to expect, the salesperson or the professional salesperson doesn't know what to expect, and all of a sudden we get to think it over? That happens quite a bit. And number four, shorten your sales cycle by conditioning our prospects to make a decision. At the end of every interaction, there should always be a decision made, no matter what it is. That decision should end up on our calendars with a mutual next step. So that's where we're going to go. First thing I want to do today is I'm going to challenge you to answer a question. I'm going to ask all of you to throw this in the chat box. This comes from our good friends at Salesforce.com. They're a client of ours at Sandler. Some of you use their CRM. They've done a number of studies over the years. This was one of my favorite ones. So here's the question. What percentage of the time is the seller out of sync with the buyer? And let me define that, put some context to it for you. What percentage of the time is the seller confused about the proposal or the scope of work that the prospect is confused about the proposal or the scope of work that the seller brings to bear? So you're a salesperson, you've submitted a proposal, the seller gets confused. I don't understand why they proposed this. This isn't what we talked about. What percentage of the time is the seller disappointed by the proposal or the bid or the scope of work that the seller brings to the table? So I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds here to throw some answers in. It's going to be a percentage. Okay, we've got 35%, 60%.
5 times fire out of sync. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Yeah, 60, 75.
75, we're getting warmer. Nice work.
80 if we don't.
80. 80 if we don't coach them. Love it. Okay, here's the answer. 82% of the time, the seller is out of sync with the buyer. The buyer is disappointed by the proposal or the presentation that they receive from the seller. And so what does that tell us? That tells us a number of different things, but the number one indicator is the seller isn't listening. In professional sales, it becomes extremely important for us to listen and to help our prospects understand that they're heard and they're understood. So if we're not doing that and we're just going in guns a-blazing, sharing with our prospect all the wonders of what we do and the scope of the services that we can provide without really understanding first what their motivation to buy might even be, or their motivation to change their behavior is, all of a sudden we're going to be guessing and we're going to submit something that's likely not as customized, tailored, and adapted to our prospects' hopes as it should be. So that's a massive area, and we're going to build upon this. I'm going to share with you about 7 reasons for unpaid consulting. As I'm doing this, I'm going to challenge you to submit your answers in your world. What are your prospects doing that prompt you to go into premature elaboration mode, where all of a sudden we find ourselves giving all kinds of data and specifics to how we're going to solve our prospects' problems, and we do that prematurely? You know, what do they have set up in their process that prompts us to do this? For me, here's what I'll share with you. Number one is the problem solver mentality. So many of us look at ourselves as problem solvers. I'm going to ask you to challenge your thought process and your belief systems to change yourself from a problem solver to a problem finder. Because we're really good at finding problems, but oftentimes if we're solving surface level problems, we never really understand what's beneath the surface. And I'm going to share with you a model. We're going to focus on that specifically today, to go beneath the surface to understand how big is that problem, how long has it been going on, what are the implications of that issue. Because if we just solve at the surface level, oftentimes our prospects are going to be disappointed by what they find. Number two, positioning oneself as an expert intellectually. So we're all experts on this webinar. Everybody on this webinar understands their craft. They know it inside and out, up and down. But here's the problem. If we position ourselves as an expert intellectually, we're never engaging the prospect emotionally. And there's a lot of folks on this call who have a technical mindset, right? If you're an attorney, if you're an engineer, we look at the world through black and white. It's technical, but we have to be able to engage the prospect emotionally, because there's a rule in sales. People buy emotionally, they justify intellectually. If we're missing that emotional component, we're going to find ourselves in trouble. Number three, and we see this a ton in the architecture world, in the building world, in the general contracting world, responding blindly to bids. If we're getting a bid or a request for proposal and we have no relationship with that company or that individual, they are likely shopping us. Yet we see a number of our clients spending up to 95% of their time responding to bids and having a win rate around 3 to 4%. And so that's a ton of inefficient and unused time that could be reinvested somewhere else to go find somebody who's more serious about doing business with us. Number four, and this directly relates to number three, is not engaging with the stars. So in any sales opportunity, we've got a cast of characters. Unless you're selling to an individual mom and pop, or there's one or two individuals in the company, we've got a cast of characters, and it ranges from the stars to the co-stars to the bit players to the supporting cast. And oftentimes it's the bit players where procurement or the purchasing level is, and we've got to be disciplined enough to position ourselves in a manner consistent with, I'm happy to respond to your bid, but in order to do so, I'm going to have a conversation with the CEO or the partner or the managing director of the organization to understand their perspective of what the issues are. The bid on paper just isn't enough context for me to understand it. So while I'm honored that you thought of us, I have to have that conversation. Otherwise, I will respectfully decline to bid. And it's amazing what happens when we position ourselves that way. All of a sudden, we get an audience with the stars, and now we have a V line right into the C-level suite. All right, premature elaboration. This is one that a lot of consultants fall prey to. Why? Because we show up in a capacity to sell something, and we want to be convincing, and we want to influence the buyer's decision, and all of a sudden, in order for us to really get a sense of respect and an expert status, we just share everything we know about our services and our products right up front. It's an information dump. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, your prospect hears Charlie Brown's teacher. You remember that? Want. Their eyes start to glaze over, and all of a sudden you've lost them. You're not the star in any sales opportunity. Your prospect is. And so we've got to give them the opportunity to share with us, what does their world look like? What are they trying to accomplish? Where have they been? No systematic process. That's another issue that we see that drops us into this unpaid consulting bucket, in that we don't have a systematic process that says, here's what I do in my sales opportunities from hello all the way to the point where we're shaking hands and we're doing business. So most salespeople, by the way, even in professional selling, their sales process is a wing it mentality. They wing it. They use their personality and intuition. The problem with personality and intuition is your personality is unlike 75% of the population out there. So that's a problem. And then intuition, mind reading never works. So that's an issue. We have to have a process. If you're a technically wired person, it drives you nuts when you don't have a process. I'm going to give you one today. And the last piece is a lack of a true understanding. And this really is a culprit of making assumptions. When we make assumptions that we understand somebody's world without hearing it through their eyes, seeing it through their eyes, hearing it through their mouth, then all of a sudden they get the sense of, this person might be an expert, but I believe I'm cookie cutter in their world. I'm not sure that they can customize and adapt to my unique situation. Just like all of you think, all right, is this webinar that I'm going to attend, is it going to speak to my business? You were probably all thinking that before you hopped on here today. And so it's my job to say, all right, can we customize it in a way so that you understand it does? So these are our reasons for unpaid consulting. We see these pop up all the time. I'm going to share with you a process in our world that's going to help us overcome this. Something else. If you would like, I'd like for you to email me in the subject line, so rich.austin@sandler.com. I'd like you to email me free in the subject line, and I'm going to send you my unpaid consulting white paper. So it's going to take what we talk about today, it's going to expand upon it, it's going to give you a little bit of sense of reinforcement. All right, so let's do this. Building strong relationships. We're going to look at a perceived value level from the side of our prospects. And this is an ascending order, so it goes from the bottom up, weakest level relationship to the strongest level relationship. How do people sell? The lowest form of selling is being a vendor or being perceived as a vendor through the eyes of your prospect. Why do vendors sell? Because they've got the lowest price. I can't imagine anybody on this webinar today wants to be known as a good commodity because they have the lowest price. So we're not going to look at vendors. Problem solvers, they sell because they solve problems, quite simply. The problem with a problem solver is eventually they run out of problems to solve. They never go beneath the surface, and so their pipelines end up drying up. Consultants, this is where this is where selling changes. And so if we take a look at where selling changes, consultants sell because they ask great questions. The issue is they too often fall into the free consulting trap of reading their own press clippings. So if I'm reading my own press clippings, it means I'm so confident in my abilities that I can walk in, I can start talking, and anybody will buy. And that's what we see from consultants. If we go one more level up, partners. Partners sell because they build relationships. And building a strong relationship says we can weather storms that indicate to me as a buyer that I am willing to invest more of a premium in your product or service because we built a relationship that says you understand me. It doesn't mean that we've mastered the art of small talk, but it does mean that you understand me, you get my world, you've presented something to me that fits exactly what I'm looking for. I look at you now as a partner, not just a consultant. And the last piece is trusted advisor. And trusted advisors sell because they build ultimate trust. And you know you're a trusted advisor when your customers start coming to you for advice on things that are completely outside of the scope of what you do for a living. And they value your reputation and your opinion so much that they place you up at this upper tier. And so we call this the trusted advisor level. So there's one question I want to ask you, and this is your prompt to type something in to the chat box. And so here's the question, and we're going to go back to salesforce.com. They did another study, and the question was this: how many sellers prefer to buy? How many prospects prefer to buy from a seller who is a trusted advisor status? Okay, so what percentage of time does a prospect prefer to buy from a seller who has that trusted advisor status? So I'm just going to let you throw some percentages into the chat box. I'm going to share with you what the answer is in just a moment.
Okay, we're getting a bunch of responses. They're catching on. 94.
94%? 90?
75.
75?
95.
95? 97?
85.
85. Good. You guys are really close. You are catching on. You're getting better as the morning wears on. So here's the answer: 79%. 79% of prospects in 2017 leading into 2018 prefer to buy from a trusted advisor. Why doesn't everybody want to buy from a trusted advisor? Because some people just look at sales as those folks who are vendors for us or problem solvers, and that's it. They don't want a high-level relationship, but better than 3 times out of 4, they're looking for a high-level relationship with somebody who has the unique skill set to come in and say, let me understand your world from a different perspective. So great work there. All right, let's do this. So understanding buyer-seller psychology. Let's look at 2 different models here and the psychology behind how most salespeople sell and how most prospects buy, because this is what we call the unpaid consulting trap. If we look at how most salespeople sell, number one thing that we do, if we really distill it down to its essence, is we qualify for interest. So we're asking questions to understand, hey, what is my prospect looking for? Once we've done that and we think we've got enough information, now it's time for us to present, to submit a value-added proposal that indicates to our prospect, I understand what you're looking for, here's my solution. Step number 3, when that prospect inevitably says, love what I'm seeing, can't do business with you right now, but we're going to think about this, we're going to mull it over, we're going to take it to the committee, we're going to take it to the board, whatever it is they say, the savvy salesperson attempts to overcome stalls and objections. And so we'll say things like, well, what's it going to take, or what can I do to shorten up this cycle, whatever it is. And most times our prospects don't relent. And again, we're going to have to wait for that answer. So then the salesperson falls into chase mode, or what salespeople commonly referred to as follow-up. They call it follow-up. I call it chasing because that's really what it is. It's an issue that plagues our industry. So from the sales side of things, we're qualifying, we're presenting, we're trying to overcome stalls and objections, and then we're chasing after our prospects for them to make a decision. If we look at their side of things, here's where it gets interesting. And there are various levels of sophistication when it comes to how folks buy. Whether it's a mom and pop or whether it's a Fortune 500, they follow the same system. They just might have some different intricacies within it. So number one on their end, and any of you that have ever bought anything, we start with gathering information. We want to know as much as we possibly can about what we're trying to accomplish before we dive into it. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to request a proposal. So in that world, we want to know what the salesperson knows, and we want to know it for free. For absolutely no impetus on our end whatsoever to give anything for that free information. So if you're an architect, it's a scope. If you're a builder, it's a scope. If you're an attorney, it's a scope. It's all the same. The bottom line is they want to know what you want to know, your intellectual property, how you're going to build the solution before anything else happens. Once we submit that proposal, and you can see how these line up very nicely with one another, number three is they negotiate. So they say something like, boy, this looks awesome. I'm going to need you to sharpen your pencil. We're going to need you to drop price, or we're going to have to put this on hold. The more emotionally involved they can get the salesperson, the more they build leverage in their world. And so that's the problem we run into. And then the fourth step is once they say something like, hey, Rich, this is fantastic. We're going to get back to you in 2 weeks. We're going to let you know exactly what our answer is. Here's Rich waiting for 2 weeks. I've got my Outlook calendar open. I'm by my business phone. I've got my cell phone out. I'm ready for that call. And the time comes and goes where they indicate they're going to call me back. And all of a sudden, my prospect has gone into hide mode. And so then the chase really starts. And this is a process, and this is a system that unfortunately is a circle of death, and it keeps just repeating itself. And this is where all of our lost time and inefficiencies go throughout the year as a selling organization. This is when we get to November and we're thinking, oh goodness, here come the holidays, and all of a sudden my time is going to be in much shorter supply. I wish I had 2 or 3 more months over the course of the year to go out there and sell. Where does it go? It's all lost here in each and every one of those opportunities. So what can we do about this? I'm going to share with you our model for how we get out of the unpaid consulting gig. And there's 7 steps here. I'm going to keep this high level, and I'm going to share with you right now. We're going to focus on this 3rd step, the 3rd compartment, which is pain. I'm going to give you a list of questions that you can ask in any sales opportunity to get you out of product or service demonstration mode. Let me tell you everything about us, and get into let me understand a little bit more about you. So the first step is bonding and rapport. The very first thing that we have to do as a selling entity is build a communication model that says trust can happen. And trust doesn't happen with small talk and you're a Bears fan and I'm a Bears fan and aren't we feeling wonderful now? It's about understanding the psychology of who is my prospect, what's their behavioral profile, how do they learn, how do they communicate and speak, and can I adapt and customize my approach to meet them so that we can resonate with one another. So this means I have to pause, I have to sit back, I have to observe, and then once I've done that, I'm going to adapt my behavior. That's bonding and rapport and nothing else. Secondly, upfront contracts. Upfront contracts are all about 2 things: building expectations for how this interaction is going to go, and making sure that we guarantee we're going to come to a logical outcome by the time we're done with this particular interaction. So in a sales opportunity, I want to build a mutual business agenda that says, here's what you expect, here's what I need to accomplish in order for you to get what you expect. And by the way, at the end, I could see one of 3 different scenarios. Number 1 scenario is, based upon your situation, I figure out I can't help you. I will tell you that. We have to get comfortable with the art of no is okay, and sharing that with our prospects so that the defenses come down and we can promote a genuine, authentic conversation model. We might then tell them, hey, you might tell me no at the end of this. You might determine based upon what you've heard, it's not a good fit for you, and if that's the case, that's okay. On the other hand, if you're hearing what you want to hear and I'm hearing what I want to hear, at the end, our next step typically looks like this, and we lay it out for them. This gives us a process. It gives us a mutual business agenda that we can then work together and says we are now at equal business stature because we've established that. So that's number 2. Number 3 is pain. And pain is the fuel that drives, in our world, any sales pipeline and any sales opportunity. And pain is all about getting our prospect to admit to and commit to doing something about the issues that they've indicated to us for the reason that they want to speak. So that's going to be critical for us to understand, and not just surface level, and I'll share with you how to get through that. Number 4 is budget. Once we've established their pain, are they willing and able to part with the time, resources, and money that it's going to take in order for us to work together effectively? So once we understand their problem, we don't jump into, let me give you a proposal. We have to do a good job of understanding what their budget looks like. And then on top of that, we have to take a look at their decision-making process. How is it that they go about making decisions about opportunities like this, about partnerships like this? So that's the third qualifying step in our process, pain, budget, and decision being those 3. Finally, fulfillment. This is where we can put a proposal in front of them. In terms of fulfillment, we want them to understand they were heard and understood, so we're going to customize it and adapt it based upon what they shared with us in pain, what they told us about what their budget was, and how they make decisions. So if we can play in that sandbox, we will. If for whatever reason we figure out in these 3 compartments it doesn't make sense for us to go forward, we won't, and that's okay. And then finally, post-sell. Once we've actually done business with one another, now it's time for us to block the competition, to keep the competition out, and onboard that new customer into our process of this is how we work together. It's also a great time for us to ask for referrals. So this is a systematic process that we execute, and we help our clients implement in their world and execute in their world, adapted and customized to their particular prospects and their sales model that they've got in place. And I mentioned the one I'm going to focus on is pain. So I am going to expose you, introduce you to a concept called the pain funnel. And in our world, the moment that we identify any type of problem or challenge or roadblock or issue that our prospect is hoping we can help them with, we don't just say, I can fix that. We ask them 7, 8 questions that are going to really give us a good sense of the breadth and depth of that situation. And so it's my hope that you can take this questioning strategy and really build out what we'll call a pain funnel for each and every one of those issues. So if we take a look at these questions, somebody says, Rich, I'm having a problem because we're not getting as many referrals as we should be. Instead of me saying, that's great, that's what we do, let me share with you the 57 different ways that we solve that, which is what the typical salesperson does. We stop, we have discipline, we might ask a question, hey, why don't you tell me a little bit more about what that means to you? Number 2, can you be more specific? Could you give me an example of what that looks like in your world? Number 3, how long has that been going on? We want them to get a sense of, how big of an issue is this really in their world? Number 4, what have you tried to do about that? Helps us understand how committed they are. Have they thought about any types of solutions besides using us in the past? Did any of that work? We want to understand, with all the different efforts that you've put into this, have you had success in any way? How much do you think that's cost you? Not only in terms of money, but time and effort and frustration. Let's get an understanding and put a dollar amount to what it's cost them, not only intellectually, but emotionally. How do you feel about that? In other words, what type of position does it put you in to know that all of this is going on and has been going on for X amount of years? And then finally, have you given up trying to deal with the problem? If they have, and they're hoping that we'll help them, great. If they haven't and they're hoping we'll help them, that's okay too. But the bottom line is, are you looking at me as a conduit for your success? This changes the nature of the conversation in selling, because it's no longer about me convincing you. It's about you psychologically taking yourself through a process where you convince yourself. So we're going to wrap up. Some power-ups to avoid free consulting. A couple of things we can do here. Build a pipeline that says you've got options. If you've got a small pipeline, then you're going to be emotionally committed to every single one of the opportunities you have. I don't want you to be there. Have many options out there so that you can run your sales calls that say, doesn't matter what the outcome is, I'm going to focus on the process. Treat each opportunity as if you know nothing. Make no assumptions. Allow them to speak for themselves. Every time you give something, get something of equal or greater value in return. So if I'm going to give a proposal, what do I need for my prospect? The right people in the room when I actually submit it and when I go over it and present it to them. The effectiveness, and this is a mindset piece, the effectiveness of an opportunity is measured more by the information you gather, not by the amount of information you disperse. On a sales call, it's about gathering, not dispersing information. Work a sales process that puts you in control. Whether you use mine or you build your own, work a sales process that says, I know exactly where I'm at and exactly what I need to do to find success. And finally, respect the credibility that you've built. So you've been in business for how many years, and your prospects are asking you consistently for, hey, give me all the intellectual property and all the years of knowledge that you've built over time. Have the discipline and the respect high enough in yourself where you're going to keep that information to yourself until it's appropriate in that fulfillment step to share it with them. Last couple of things. Number one, I want to thank you for attending. This was a quick down and dirty 30 minutes, and I know we moved very quickly, but I want to thank you for attending. If you would, you can email me, rich.austin@sandler.com. Again, put free in the subject line. I'm going to share with you the Unpaid Consulting white paper. And also submit your number one takeaway. In that email, if you just want to give me one thing that you took away from our 30 minutes this morning and how it's going to impact your business, that's more accountability for you to actually put it in play. Last thing I want to share with you, really right here in the middle, we're going to host a live sales mastery workshop in person. This won't be a webinar. It's an in-person executive briefing called The Multiplier Effect, Building a Prospecting Toolkit for Rapid Business Growth. So we're going to host that here in Naperville at our training center right here where you see me on February 26th from 12 to 2 p.m. I'd like to invite each and every one of you to that. If you enjoyed today, we're going to go a lot wider and deeper with that sort of a program. Some free resources. If you go to our website here, we've got our webinars. We've got a host of library of webinars, podcast templates and scripts. And then, of course, if you want to be a part of our sales tip on a weekly basis, you can text sales tip to 35893. So again, I appreciate your time and your effort today. There's a number of other places that you could have been. You chose to be here with us this morning, and so we acknowledge you for that, and we thank you for that. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and go sell something. I'm Rich Austin. Take care.